stuck here. The cops won't bother me. Well guys, I just bought the fork seals for this thing, and of course it is leaking pretty bad. Now the issue is that the fork seals, I thought they were going to be coming pretty soon. They're going to be coming in 2 months, in July. So one of the things I'm probably going to be doing, just so I don't get oil all over my brakes, I'm just going to wrap a cloth around here, and I'm really just hoping that I can hold it while I can still ride it for a month or so. Of course, these tires are pretty much done, but you know, I've worked on a lot of Japanese bikes, and this is no different. They really have not changed a lot of the way these bikes operate. You know, it's funny, I have the Ninja 250 right here and the Shadow. They're not horribly different to work on from one another. Both of these bikes, as hard it is to believe, they're both carbureted. Yep, carbureted. This is a 2010, that's a 1985, so just insane. Very different sounding bikes here. This is a V-twin, so let me just give you like a little bit of a rundown. I don't think I've given you some good reviews of this. So on this side you have your speedometer, you have your odometer, you have your trip, and then you have your odometer down here. And on this right side you have your tach, which is very nice to have in 1985. And down here you have your temperature gauge. And to reset your trip, there's a button that's flush here. Normally I thought there'll be like a trip and you just twist it. That's what a lot of these old bikes have. Now here you have your dummy lights: turn, oil, tail light, fuel, high beam, neutral, and odometer. This right handlebar, you have the throttle, you have your kill switch, and you have your starter. Of course you have your master cylinder that I fixed using a coin, and that's holding. On this side you have your high beam, your turn signals, and your horn. I try to do once in a while is just kind of see if there's any hydraulic fluid leaking, because at one point it did leak, and you can see it started to wear away at the paint over there. But I find that this bike is quite fascinating. It's got a solo seat, but I do have the sissy bar option for it, which I don't like. I don't like this whole shape here. This is where the turn signals are. I think it would look really good just by having a seat that went across here without these bars. So that might be the only thing that I would really make different on this bike. This one has got a drum rear brake, so you don't see this very much. I have the shocks on the side, 2 symmetrical shocks. Most modern bikes have one shock. You see the shock on that one. Most bikes have that. And of course, in a way it's good for having just one shock, but the twin shocks are so much easier to remove. You know, you got a bolt there, you can just pop it out, and it's so much easier to reach that carburetor than the Ninja 250. You know, it's strange that the front tire is a 19-inch front wheel, which is the same as my Suzuki V-Strom 650, and I do like the idea of having a 19-inch front wheel because it makes much more sense. It's much more stable. Coming to the front, you have aftermarket front brake lines, which I need to get because it creates a weird hoop here. You have twin horns, and then down, that's a glass headlight. I always admire when these makers were putting glass in there. Now everything is just plastic. And of course you have your main fuse here, which is very easy to remove. This just kind of pops out and then you can remove it. But I wish that Honda put all the fuses in the same place. It handles fairly okay, but any slow speed sort of maneuverability, I'm hitting my own body as I'm turning, because you know it turns pretty far, but when you turn it you're actually kind of touching your body. And also when my legs are down on the floor, my thighs are actually hitting this, and this gets very, very hot. And it's cold. I can give it a little bit of a choke here. Let me turn off the choke, and you can see it idles pretty well. Got some new gloves. These are, you're able to like use your phone and stuff and your GPS with them. But it's a fun bike to ride. Fun in a very different way, like an easy rider way. Quite tremendously in the last few days, actually the last one day, it went from $1.50 to $1.85 just seemingly overnight. But we filled this bike almost up with 2.6 gallons, so I had about a gallon left over in the tank. But look at that, it sounds really good for such an old bike. That V-twin engine, you can't go wrong. That's what I'm finding. If you have money and you want a bike that's just fun to ride, I think the thing that you want to do is get a V-twin. You know, I was very surprised with V-twins. I've never been a fan because on paper V-twins don't make a lot of horsepower, and they're not great when it comes to weight. They weigh more, but they are much more fun as regular street bikes. This motor is fantastic. The motor and transmission are flawless. From 1985, you would think that somehow this bike would be a little bit faultier, that perhaps it didn't ride as well, but it does ride well. It feels very tight. The motor doesn't burn oil, it doesn't use oil, it doesn't smoke. The transmission, there's no misses. This is typical of Honda. The engine and transmission are just amazing. And of course Honda started out making motorcycles, so they have quite a bit of experience building great engines. Now keep in mind, when I talk about chassis, I am talking about frame and the way it kind of handles in the curves and stuff. And also keep in mind that I'm more of a sport bike guy, so I'm looking at it from a very different perspective than most guys would be looking at. But I do notice that the frame is very good. It's stiff, but yet plush at the same time. It kind of feels like a luxury car instead of a sports car. And it makes it very easy to ride around. But I think when I push it, if I push this bike a little bit in corners and stuff, there's a lot of flexing. But I think that's it wasn't meant for that sort of riding. It wasn't meant for corners. So in a way, I prefer bikes to be a little stiffer, because I can go around corners a little bit faster and a little bit better. So when it comes to handling, because of the handlebars, and you notice like I have very little position here from the handlebars to my leg, the handling is not great, but it wasn't meant for cornering. So it's a bike that was meant for casual riding and maybe even commuting. But I find that commuting around this area, I would definitely want something a little bit more sporty. Now, I've looked at prices for Honda Shadows and everything varies. The funny thing is that 1980s Shadows like this hold their value just as well as the early 2000 Shadows. I think a lot of it has to do with the new retro movement of fixing up and changing motorcycles. People really enjoy these older bikes because they're very easy to work on, and they are. I mean, when you work on the carburetor on this, it's very simple, very easy to remove. Maintenance, it doesn't really need a lot, but you do have to pay attention to the things that go wrong on these bikes, because you do have a bike from the 1980s, and when it's like 30 years old, that means that you're gonna have to renew a lot of hoses. So if you buy one, make sure that the previous owner took care of it. Make sure that it was garaged, because you want one of these older bikes to be garaged. There's a lot less things that do break, because it stood outside for so long. It just broke. And all the hoses, fuel hoses, they're going to be needing replacements. All the air hoses, coolant hoses. There's a lot of expense that comes from the initial buying of an old 80s Honda. But I think it's very rewarding to ride something this old. You know, like I keep telling myself that I'm riding a 35-year-old motorcycle. That's really incredible. And it's just like a little time capsule. Because, you know, cruisers normally are not, and I think a very good rider would have been able to go around corners almost effortlessly, but most people are not going to be riding these bikes and going around corners and dragging pegs and all of that good stuff. What people are going to be doing is casually riding this bike, and for casual rides this is more than enough that people want. And this bike is quiet too. When you start moving, of course, it does liven up quite a bit because of the V-twin, but very quiet. I don't know if it's everybody's taste to have a quiet bike. You know, I always wonder who the audience is for the bike. 1985 in 2020. So who are buying these old bikes? And I think there's two people. There's the beginners who want something cheap to learn on, and who are probably relatively short, because this is a very easy bike to flat foot. It makes a lot of sense for women because they're a little bit shorter. This bike is not very intimidating, so there are those type of people that would be inclined to get this. And then there's another side of people that would get this, and that is the modders. And the modders like to completely change motorcycles and cars. I'm gonna make a right here. And the modders, I think a lot of them want to build bobbers and choppers out of this bike. And think about it, I mean, you can get one of these for like $1,000, and you can probably even get it for less if it's not working. And if you get it, you know that the Honda engine is probably still good. You're probably going to have to put some work in, but you'll be able to modify it, put that engine to work. The frame is going to be good. It's a good platform for a customizable bike. Well, Squids, thanks for riding with me. That's the Honda Shadow in a nutshell. Fantastic bike. Go out, search for one. Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace. You can find them. You can find good deals out there. But of course, you know, you got to make sure that you learn about it, because, you know, the HondaShadow.net group is really good. They help me out tons getting this thing fixed up. Alright, Squids, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.